I can't even tell you how intimidating that is. Just knowing that thing's running. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited that you're all here. Some people I've not seen for a long time. Some people I've never seen before at all. And yeah, some are old friends. So it's really lovely to have you here. And whoever you are online, I'm really happy that you're here too. So I thought I would start off with a little sort of interactive bit. Don't worry, you don't have to leave your seats or look silly or dress up or anything. Hello, Lorenzo. Good to see you. One of my interviews for the book has just walked in. So lovely to meet you both. Hi. So let's try this, okay? I have picked some totally random questions from the Life in the UK test to see if you guys would fare well in these types of tests. The questions that you have to answer if you want to become a British citizen. So I reckon that I'm just going to read the question, give you the options. Also you guys online, and then you can think of what you think the right answer is, and then we'll just have a little show of hands of whether you were right or wrong. But you know, if you're too shy, don't worry. So let's have this one. So this is a random question. When Henry VIII took the title King of Ireland, English laws were introduced and everyone except for local leaders were expected to follow the instructions of the Lord Lieutenants in Dublin. Is that true or false? Have a little think. Now let's have a guess, please. And how many of you thought it was true? How many of you thought it was false? The falsers have it. It is when Henry VIII took the title King of Ireland, English laws were introduced and local leaders were also expected to follow the instructions. Right, here's the next one. You're going to get 4 options with this. When is the anniversary of the Battle of the Boyne celebrated in Northern Ireland? Is it March, May, June, or July? Make your choice. And the answer is July. Who was right? Oh, well done. I reckon these are the people who've read John Lingard's July, because that's the only reason I know that. Okay, when was Lincoln Cathedral built? Was it in the 19th century? Was it in medieval times? Was it after the Roman invasion? Or was it in the 18th century? Make your choice. I'm liking, I wish you could see the squirming faces here. So the answer is in medieval times. Who was right? Excellent. Well done, guys. You can be British. Let's have the next one. For which purpose was the Statute of Rhuddlan introduced? Was it to annex Scotland to the Crown of England? Was it to annex Northern Ireland to the Crown of England? Was it to annex Ireland to the Crown of England? Or was it to annex Wales to the Crown of England? Make your choice. And the answer is, it was to annex Wales. Did anybody get that right? Kira, only one person got that right. Gosh, okay. So I'm not going to go through them all, but let's have one more. These are pretty random. I just wanted to show you what a sort of strange thing you have to do in order to become British. There are 2 seats right at the front, and you should take one of them if you want. Excellent. There you go. Very welcome. This is a very old friend. Hi, so lovely to see you. Yay. Very good. Sorry, guys, I didn't know he was coming. So here's your next one. When was the first tennis club founded in the UK? The first tennis club, okay? Was it 1772, 1872, 1862, or 1762? Who else thinks this question is ridiculous? So, which one's the right answer? Make your little guess. Okay, and the answer is 1872. So who got that one right? Just by pure fluke. No way did you know that, did you? No, okay. So you can see that the kind of bizarre questions that we're faced with when we're having to test people, whether they're suitable for British citizenship. You know, it's a little bit random, let's say. And I was really surprised. And, I guess it was part of my journey, this whole citizenship test, part of my journey to become British, which I now am, as well as German. But it really just raised all of these questions about identity and what it actually means, to be belonging to a country, to be part of a country, to be a citizen. Does it mean knowing these dates and how many people sit on a youth court jury in England, and how many meters away you're allowed to stand from whatever it was that they were asking you about? It was a little bit bizarre. So I thought I would talk about this book more as a sort of little bit of a background about why I wrote it, and then I'll give you a few readings, and maybe we can even have a bit of a discussion, because I anticipate that some people here may not be from this country either, and it would be interesting to hear your perspective of what belonging actually means and what we can do to belong. The bottom line is, if this journey with this book, Scottish by Inclination, has taught me anything, I think it's the fact that belonging is actually a choice. You choose to belong, and you choose not to care anymore what other people may say or think. You make yourself part of life wherever you are. And I think for me, that has brought a degree of closure to the whole thing, despite Brexit and all these things that I'm not very happy about. So Scottish by Inclination isn't just a Brexit book. And I think I worry sometimes that people think it will be a very angry book because it was published, in the aftermath of Brexit, because the cover looks political, and it kind of is. But actually, it's a book about 30 years in this country, and it's about 30 other people, not just myself. So obviously the camera can't swing round, but in the audience are sitting two people who are actually interviewed within the pages of this book. So, there's pictures of them all in the middle section. And Lorenzo, for example, is a really, really clever entrepreneur who's come up with a sort of drone that you can use inside grains. And it means that wastage is reduced massively. Huge difference. And widely applicable everywhere. Tanya is a drama practitioner, bringing out creativity in young people and promoting her own culture and her own language in primary schools and in nurseries. And, I think these people are making a difference in the world here for the better. And so I wanted to write this book just about my journey, but also about the 30 people who are featured here, who have also made a difference, hopefully, in their own little corner of Scotland, and have contributed and belonged to Scottish society. By way of introduction, apologies if you have read the book, or if I'm going to repeat anything that you already know. Chances are there are one or two here. But the truth was that I had completely forgotten I was a foreigner by the time that I reached this whole sort of Brexit territory. But it was a useful exercise for me to cast my mind back to how it all started. So I think I'm going to read you a little chapter from the arrival in Scotland. My first time of arriving in Scotland was Glasgow Airport, and this is what happened. And straight up, this is what happened. "You'll recognise him, he's really tall," Louis said. I raised my eyebrows. "He'll be there, don't worry." I was still unconvinced. How will I recognise him if I've never even met him? Do you have a photo? My friend Louis shook his head and giggled, as if suddenly struck by a thought of pure genius. "Ha, look, he's called Fergus McNeill, right? And when we worked together in London, he used to really like this song, Celebration by Kool and the Gang. That can be your signal." What? To me, an uninitiated German about to move to Scotland for the duration of my degree, Louis was the nearest thing to a native, a Londoner, albeit jobbing in Germany, but with a host of useful connections. One of these, his friend Fergus, was to pick me up from Glasgow Airport, drop me at his parents' house overnight, and see me onto some sort of transport to Edinburgh the morning after. Simple and straightforward, but this was Louis. "Sing this song," he said. "That way he'll definitely know it's you." Louis winked. I decided to leave it. After all, I didn't want him to think that the wind-up was working. Barely a week later, I had done the necessary. Guitar and gargantuan backpack stored in the plane's hold, I sat in my seat on the edge of the atmosphere and cried. I cried for the parents I'd left behind, for my sister about to give birth, for the enormity of my decision, and for the country disappearing under clouds beneath me now, which would no longer be my home as soon as I touched down on Scotland's rain-soaked asphalt. It was dusk. The businessman beside me pushed his way into the queue. In fact, everyone who had dozed and lazed their way through the flight was suddenly in a rush, except me. Like the landing jolt, it struck me. I wasn't just scared of going. I was scared of arriving. What had possessed me to want to come here? Guitar and backpack reclaimed, I shuffled through the exit gate. For all that these complete strangers knew, I was naturally puffy-faced and red-nosed. I had more important things to worry about anyway, finding Fergus. I scanned the crowd, already thinning with greetings and departures. A couple of men were tall, I guessed. I sauntered past them both. Neither of them paid me the slightest bit of attention. Waiting alone in an arrivals lounge late at night in a strange country, I began to panic until it struck me. Stroke of genius, Louis. Very funny. He's primed Fergus not to declare himself until I took a deep breath. So be it. Picking my guitar up, I sauntered past the first tall man who'd sat down by now, humming with ever-increasing volume as I passed. He looked up, but not with recognition, with something else I'd rather not think about. I decided to give the other man a try, even though he was now hugging an elderly woman who'd be on the plane behind me, singing timidly now, "Celebration." I'm ashamed to admit I even sang the guitar riff that followed. Both tall men disappeared down the emptying arrivals lounge, but come to think of it, Louis was small. Maybe to him, almost anyone would be tall. Nothing for it. Celebration. By the time I heard loud footsteps echoing, I was pretty much singing out all my desperation at top volume. A ridiculously tall young man ran into the hall, where by now only a few people milled around, most of them cleaners, and a singing German student, of course. He'd gone to the wrong gate by mistake. Almost 30 years later, this country has now become my country. I have arrived. And if you recall a very odd time at Glasgow Airport where a dishevelled teenager spontaneously burst into song, maybe now you'll understand. So that's the first chapter of Scottish by Inclination. And really from that moment onward, it's a sort of blow-by-blow account of things that were important in my relationship with Scotland. So I'm going to give away a wee trade secret here. I did not pitch this as a book about myself at all. I pitched this as a collection of 30 essays, 30 interviews with people who had come from elsewhere in Europe to make the case for, European immigration has been a great thing for Scotland. And I pitched it, and the publishers, UF Press, got in touch and said, we would like to see this manuscript, we're interested, let's discuss. So we discussed it and we decided, yes, we're going to work together. How fantastic. What a lovely moment in a writer's life when you reach that. And then they said, but there's something missing, Barbara. And I was like, what? I can do more interviews. They said, no, you need something to have a reader start at the beginning of the book and drag them all the way through it. It can't just be a bitty thing. And they likened it to a newspaper sort of Sunday supplement, where you've got 2 or 3 little profiles or a little interview, and it's something that you pick up and then you put down and you're not really invested in reading the rest. And they said, you need something that's going to make them feel invested in reading the rest of it. So how about making it autobiographical? And I went, absolutely not, and walked away. And it was really afterwards that I kind of gave it a go. And I wrote this chapter, this very one that I've just read you. And I kind of thought, oh, that was quite fun to write, actually. That was, I quite enjoyed writing that. And lo and behold, a few other memories sort of came into my head. And some of them were funny, actually. They weren't angry kind of political rants. They were funny memories of, coming from a different country and getting things wrong and not understanding what things mean and not getting the sense of humor. And these kind of things were the things that were popping into my head. And then I had an epiphany. I just kind of thought, this is a book about my relationship with Scotland. It's not a book about my life. I don't have to put everything in. My husband, who one or two of you know, is probably the most private individual you could ever meet. he would absolutely hate to have all his details in this book. And it was that moment of realization, I didn't have to do it. You know, I could actually make this book about Scotland and me, and everything else was going to be, you know, ignored largely. And of course he's mentioned, but on one point he you know, pops up as being my boyfriend. The next 2 chapters pass without a single mention, and then I'm married to him. You know what I mean? And it doesn't have to include all of that. So I guess that made me feel maybe I made a mistake saying no. And I sort of ate humble pie in the most massive way possible, and wrote the email where I said, you know, when I said no, I meant yes. Can we talk about this some more? And how about this? Here's a little sample chapter that I've written. And thankfully, they were very supportive, and I set to work. So I arranged Zoom interviews with lots and lots of internationals, many of whom made it into the book. I met some fantastic people online. And, you know, it was just an absolute well, because whoever I found knew another 2 or 3 people who would make brilliant interviewees and so on. So I had to kind of stop the floodgates at one point, because, you know, there's a huge kind of wealth of talent that immigrants have brought to the country, not just from Europe, obviously, but that was my focus for this book. So, yeah, and it took probably about 3-4 months before I had all my interviews under my belt, and I needed to kind of get myself disciplined to write the chapters about myself. And it was a really nice balance. You know, you had sort of 2 or 3 appointments in the week that you would, you know, speak to people for an hour or so. I think Lorenzo's interview was conducted over the phone, wasn't it? I think it wasn't even a Zoom meeting. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I can't remember. Some of them, I mean, there was one that was like, I'm sure the guy was sitting in a taxi, you know, and every second word was, what? You know what I mean? But I managed to get something out of him anyway, and he's in the book. So it was an experience. I'm very different from the children's adventures that I usually write. So it was a really, really lovely thing then to say at the end of it, it's finished. This is my lockdown project. I don't know about you and how much you know about writer's life, but a lot of my income comes from going to schools and book festivals. You know, that's when you get paid. Yes, you get a royalty check twice a year, or once a year actually, with some publishers, but it's not, you know, it's not enough to live on for most authors, I don't think. So yeah, I'm seeing nodding from 1 or 2 people you know. You know, so I think, you know, for me, school visits are absolutely part of, you know, my income, festival appearances, the kind of thing that you get paid for. And then, of course, all of that fell off a cliff during the lockdown period. So, you know, thankfully, we had just agreed we were going to do the book. And so I had something to get my teeth into, and I applied for some funding. I just thought, I've never done this before, but I'm going to try. And I applied for some funding to pay myself a little bit of money to write the book. And lo and behold, Creative Scotland said yes, and gave me some cash for that. So, you know, here was a double motivator. Not only did I have a publisher waiting for it, but I also had a ticking clock and a sort of deadline imposed by a funding organisation. So, you know, I felt like I had quite a purposeful lockdown, actually, getting some of this stuff done. And the beauty was none of my appointees or interviews could say, oh, no, sorry, too busy, or I'm away, or whatever, because everybody had to stay home. So I knew they could speak to me if they really wanted to. So, but yeah, and I think one thing that I decided very early on was that I didn't want this to be very serious or very angry. I wanted it to be a book that would also have lighthearted moments. So, and again, apologies if you've read it and if you know this chapter, but it's one of my favorite ones to read out. And it's about the faff of renewing a passport if you live in a foreign country. So let me try and find the pesky passport, which is in here somewhere. Do you know that's embarrassing when you have to look up your actual own book's references? Page 133, just in case you're checking at home, guys. Page 133 it is. There we go. One of the hassles of being a foreigner is renewing your documentation. I once left my driving license on a plane. It seemed ironic that I had to book another plane to rectify the situation, flying to Germany and submitting to the ostentatiously bureaucratic system of queues, long forms, furrowed frowns and fees. By the time I'd lived in the Highlands for a few years, my passport renewal became an urgent task. "You really need to get your skates on about that," commented Rob over dinner. It's one of his favourite phrases, and one I still hear with uncanny frequency. That probably says more about me than it does about him. But there was no arguing this time, he was right. I don't normally mind driving, but a 7-hour trip along the infamous A9, navigating to the German consulate in central Edinburgh and facing down German bureaucracy was going to be a challenge, and all before the end of the primary school day. There was no other option. I primed a couple of friends to step in, should I prove elusive at the end of the school day, and set off. The weather was bright, at least. I had an appointment, and as the mother of young kids, I was on my own for the first time in a very long time. Giddy with independence, I played my favourite CDs in the car stereo, singing along loudly. You'd think that after a decade in Edinburgh, I'd be familiar with its streets. But to be honest, little of my time in Old Reekie had involved driving. I had no sat-nav in those days, which meant glancing down at the city planner on my lap whenever traffic lights allowed. Miraculously, there was an empty parking space outside the rather grand building on Eglinton Crescent. I breathed deeply, realising that I had been semi-holding my breath for the past half hour. A quick look at my watch and I strode up the stairs. In and out was the phrase I had used to Rob. I needed to sign something or other in person. I had to have my previous passport scanned. And of course, the German officials had to compare my new passport photograph with my face to verify that it was really me. None of these things I objected to particularly. However, I objected very strongly to what happened next. "Oh," the official's voice rang with disappointment as she leafed through my document wallet. "What is it?" I was drumming my fingers on the edge of her desk without noticing, already planning my route from here back to the Forth Road Bridge. "Your passport photographs, they're not eligible, I'm afraid." "What? What? What do you mean?" "Sorry, but these are British passport photographs." "I paid good money to have them taken," I protested, but she launched into a speech about dimensions and angles and guidelines which my confused brain simply couldn't follow. I interrupted her. "Are you telling me I've made a 7-hour trip for nothing?" She nodded. I exploded. "That's ridiculous. Why did nobody tell me this? Is there a photographer who does the right kind of picture? For crying out loud, I thought I needed to have my face in it. These ones have my face in it. What's wrong with these ones?" I waved the clutch of rejected visages. There is something you could try, I suppose." In fairness, the woman seemed sympathetic to my plight. "What?" I snapped. "There is an approved photographer for German passport pictures in Dalry Road. You could try there." The very next minute, I was sprinting down Palmerston Place towards Haymarket Station. Clutching my wallet, I crossed the road and cut into Dalry Road. It is a long, long street, but eventually the little shop appeared on my horizon and I sped up for the finish line. I crashed through the door before the alarmed photographer. "Can you take my passport photo for a German passport?" I wheezed, staggering towards the chair. Sure, that'll cost you about..." "I don't care, just do it, please, thank you," I added as an afterthought. "I'm really, really pushed for time. I've got kids coming out of school in Inverness in 4 hours." I straightened up. You're not supposed to smile in passport photographs. But on this occasion, I wasn't even tempted. Right here, a scowl was my natural habitat. I barely looked at the resulting photographs. Bloodshot eyes peeked out from flame-flushed skin with my hair in windswept disarray. I shoved them in the envelope, lobbed a banknote in the direction of the photographer, and shot back out into the street. I've never been much of a runner, but worry lent me wings that day. German style, I pushed to the front of the queue and waved to catch the attention of the official who had dealt with my inquiry before. "Oh, good, you got it." She stamped the documents with gusto and handed me the finished form with a flourish. To her credit, the corners of her mouth only curled up a little when she inspected the photographs. A swift glance at my watch confirmed my worst fears. I was in trouble now. I stumbled onto the pavement and was stopped in my tracks. My car was blocked in by a lorry. 2 men in high visibility vests were in the process of clamping my car. Council badges on their jackets. Excuse me, what are you doing? Hey, what do you think you're doing? Get away from my car, I yelled. They turned in slow motion. That's my car. I'm sorry. I got held up and these spaces are for residents only. One of them began. No doubt these were the lines they were delivering to parking offenders with devastating candor every day. No, please, no. I've got kids to pick up from school in Inverness in 3 hours. Please, I'm begging you. One of them started scribbling in a notebook. The other reached for a fixed penalty notice. He handed it to me. £60 fine, he announced, as if this was a great mercy, and I bit my tongue. His pal had started loosening the clamps on my wheels at last. I didn't want to jeopardize my chances of escape. Thank you very much, I whimpered weakly until they drove off. I zoomed out of the gap. It's possible I broke several speed records on my way up north. By sheer miracle, I screeched into the school car park in time with the bell, early enough to receive my skipping brood. So, asked Rob over dinner that night, how was your day? So that's the passport. Thank you very much. That's great. So I really wanted, everyday stuff to come through, like misunderstanding humor, getting the wrong end of the stick, which, we do a lot. When you come from a different country, I mean, that is the challenge, is to somehow fit in and not stand out too much. And you try your hardest, and it doesn't always work. But of course, the book was, I guess, triggered by Brexit and the whole debate that ensued all around that. And I'm kind of wearing my little EU t-shirt here today, just as a little secret. Of course, if people disagree with me, I can live with that. But I feel like I need to say that my life, as it has been, would not be possible now for anyone. I was one of the very first to be able to study for my whole degree in this country and not have to pay fees. The EU covered that. After my degree, I was able to stay on and work, and there was no problem with that because this was my territory already. I had to ask no permission, and I worked here blithely, happily for over 25 years before anyone sort of realized I was a foreigner. I had totally forgotten it myself. And really, it was the whole Brexit discourse that brought out a whole new perspective on myself. There was a moment of sort of othering yourself almost, and even now, just last time I went to Germany, I was one queue and all my family had to go the other way. I had one passport check and they had to go elsewhere. There was an othering, there was a process here that I hadn't anticipated, and that honestly hurt a little bit. And I think that is what finally made me think I want to say something positive about immigration. I want to make the case that, these people have contributed massively to Scottish society, and, that what they have brought is every bit as valuable as what all of you who have been here for your whole lives have brought. And, we are all richer for it. And so I felt like, it would misrepresent the book if I didn't read you at least a little bit of that process. So I think the Brexit referendum is probably the one that I'll read. And again, apologies if you've heard this before. Normally, writing is how I make sense of the world. That's kind of my way of responding to tricky situations and to joyful moments. I find something to say and I pick up the pen. So here is what I wrote about the Brexit referendum. The June morning sun swirled through the glass. I fumbled to switch off my alarm and blinked hard before swinging myself out of bed. As the only early riser in our family, and even that label is worn half-heartedly, I staggered downstairs and clipped the dog on the lead. The morning dog walks are mine, generally. In the evening, I wilt like a daisy, and the thought of heading out into the inevitable lashing rain fills me with dread. No, I'd rather take the morning hit. There are a variety of routes around our neighbourhood in Inverness. It becomes an autopilot exercise, except for that morning. Hello, shouted a man from 2 streets along. Big day today, huh? My brain was still doing its morning stretches. What? Why big day? Brexit? He shook his head. He was a fellow German, a forester who had lived here almost as long as I had. His wife had taken their child to our German-speaking children's group years ago. Aren't you worried? He wanted to know. Why would I be worried? I didn't think I knew a single person who supported Brexit, and surely Nigel Farage by himself couldn't win a referendum. No, not worried, I declared blithely. Ah, he answered with his trademark smile, I'm not so sure. I walked home more slowly than I had set out. Really? Was it even remotely possible that the country would vote to come out of Europe? The pictures of endless lines of Eastern Europeans queuing up to get into Britain had been discredited. The 300 million a week for the NHS claim had been a fabrication of the Leave campaign. No, I thought, people can see through this. And yet, I watched Indonesians stand in line outside the polling station at the end of our road, but I didn't join them. As a European citizen, I had no right to vote in a UK referendum. That in itself was unsettling. As EU citizens here, we were the ones whose lives would be the most drastically affected. And yet on this issue, we were silenced. I had no voice in the decision the country would make that day. I valued the institution of the EU immensely. It had made free movement possible for people like me, enabling us to work, live, study, wherever we chose. Now I had to trust those around me to value it too, and I did trust them. In the run-up to the day, it was hard not to take some of the debate personally. Several acquaintances had expressed surprise that this referendum had anything to do with me. We don't mean you, obviously, not people like you. People like me, who have lived and worked here, claimed no benefits, contributed to society by volunteering and looking after their local communities. Well, that was a little rich. The point was, if we left the EU, people like me wouldn't be able to come in the first place. Of course, I recognise that not every person who supported Brexit had a personal vendetta against immigrants. But in the rhetoric, it did feel like a driving factor. In the evening, there was a real sense of occasion on the BBC. Polls have now closed for the referendum on British membership of the European Union, announced David Dimbleby, the veteran journalist who entertainingly once had to miss question time because he had been knocked unconscious by a bull on his Sussex farm. We expect the first results to come in at midnight. Rob and I exchanged a glance across the sofa. Are we staying up? I asked. Rob hesitated. It was a Thursday, a school night. He'd have work the next morning. For a bit, he mumbled. The unspoken words hung in the air. We'll watch until we're sure that there's nothing to worry about. We'll soon see how it's going. We brewed some strong coffee, gently coaxed the teenagers upstairs and made ourselves comfortable. I brought a duvet down from the bedroom. There was much speculation. Interviews with focus groups and interested commentators only part held our interest. The footage of students sprinting across sports halls with ballot boxes was more like it. It felt like a Hollywood blockbuster, and hopefully one which was going to finish with a satisfying outcome. We expected to be safe in a roller coaster sort of way. You take your seat, you strap in for a moment, the illusion of deadly danger sends your heart rate soaring, but you're never in danger, not really. We began to shift uncomfortably as result after result was shared. True to my expectation, Scotland voted comfortably to stay within the European Union, but it was a different story in England. At around 1 o'clock, Rob decided to go to bed. I can't watch anymore, he said. I stretched myself out on my own and wrapped the duvet tightly around me for comfort as I saw the world I knew crumble. Had I ever known this country at all? Who were these people who wanted to stop immigration at all costs? Who around me had been in on this plan? I drifted in and out of the nightmare. At 4:40 a.m. on the 24th of June 2016, a tired-looking David Dimbleby announced, "The British people have spoken and their answer is, we're out." I woke Rob to let him know. A couple more hours of sleep were wishful thinking. The days which followed were a strange blur, a hangover of scrambled thoughts and tearfulness. I was mortified to find myself crying on an elevator in the local shopping centre. Who of you voted for this? I wondered as I looked across the throng of shoppers. We don't mean you, not people like you. It's not personal. From where I was standing, the decision felt very personal indeed. So you can kind of see a slightly different vibe in the book. How am I doing for time, Myri?
It is 3:10.
3:10. So I think what I'll do is I'll take some questions if you have any, and then after that I'll finish with just one more reading. But if you have any questions at all about writing or this particular book or what motivated me to write it, then have a little think about that now as I take a little sip of water, and then we can take it from there and maybe have a bit of a discussion. I would absolutely love for some people in the audience to maybe share their stories as well, although it doesn't matter, does it, if the phone doesn't pick it up? Sorry guys, online.
There's also lots of questions online, so if you want me to start with those.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, actually that would be really helpful. Do that.
It gives you guys time.
Time to think. Think, people, think.
So the first question is from Ali. There don't seem to be many spaces for these nuanced, rich migrant perspectives. How can we foster or encourage more? Would you do a follow-up book or a newspaper column?
I already do a newspaper column. Thank you for your question, Ali. This is the weirdest thing, looking at a phone and talking to it. Yeah, I write a newspaper column up in the Highlands already, but it's not about immigration. It's largely about books and the writing world. Although, obviously bits of this crept into the column. I would love to see more of this. I sense that there's a little bit of fatigue, political fatigue in Brits around me and the international community too. I think people have fought their fights and they're tired and they just want to get on with how the world is now, I think. And maybe we've lost some of that, that focus that we maybe should have. I'm hopeful we'll regain it. But I think certainly around Brexit and that particular immigration conversation, it seems to me that people are a little bit tired and don't want to hear anymore. But I absolutely agree with you on the need for nuanced perspectives. I feel that, in politics and probably aided by social media, polarization has just gone to such an extreme that it feels like everybody shouts into their own echo chamber and nobody listens to each other anymore. And that's not what discourse is. And I think what we should find is discourse. So yeah, I would love to see more books of that ilk, and more nuanced. And this one here, it's not a highly sort of intelligent. I'm not playing with words here. I'm not a poet. I'm simply stating things how they happened. And I would love to see people in different styles tackling something like this. Yeah, thank you for your contribution. Great. Is there another?
Yeah. There was a good follow-up to that, I think, which was from Maria. Have you seen more migrant solidarity between EU citizens and global migrants since Brexit? It felt that before that the rest of us were a bit forgotten.
Do you know what? I agree that maybe there is a bit more solidarity. Do you think there is, Lorenzo? Yeah, you would definitely think that. What do you think, Tanya? Between EU citizens who live in Britain, is there more solidarity between those since the whole Brexit thing? Has it brought people together? You're not sure.
I don't see much difference in
your little world. Yeah. I mean, certainly there were online groups like the 3 million and a lot of sort of mutual encouragement where people could seek advice. And I think, and in some ways, you always gravitate towards the people who are experiencing similar things to yourself. So, like a lot of the things that, people who I was interviewing for the book said really resonated with me. And, it was quite nice because in some ways, when you come to Britain, for me, certainly, I was trying to avoid other migrants like the plague. I was trying to learn English. I wanted to have Scottish friends. I wanted to, immerse myself in this culture and become part of it. And, I wasn't particularly interested in just finding my little tribe of fellow Germans. I think maybe Brexit did turn that around a little bit. Yeah, we were seeking each other out more, I think, for solidarity and advice, because all of us were sort of, we forget, but there was this whole time when we had no idea what was going to happen. where the British government was holding back guaranteeing the rights of EU citizens. And it was a bargaining chip. And, I don't know if you can see, but on the back of the book, I'm holding my little demo sign where I say, I'm all these things, I'm a wife, a mother, a teacher, a taxpayer, a volunteer, but actually I'm not a bargaining chip. And, let's just put the cross there. That's not what I am. Please don't treat me like it. And I think that also united us. We forget what the pandemic was like when you can only take one walk a day. We forget so quickly. Our brains just erase what we don't like, I think. Yeah. Thank you. Great question. So any questions from the audience at all? Right, come on then.
Just wondering if there are any countries you struggled to find somebody to...
Oh my word, yes. There were one or two. So essentially, I was asking for people's stories. And, of course, you have to kind of have a little bit of a relationship to be trusted with their stories. So, and some of them I found, through LinkedIn. I think, Lorenzo, maybe I found you through LinkedIn, but somebody had pointed me towards you saying you should find this guy, he's great. Tanya was a member of the same writing group, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So I kind of knew her through that. And I just put a call out. But yeah, I had trouble with Estonia and Cyprus in particular. And Estonia, I don't know, there was one lady I really wanted to interview, but she wanted me to pay for her time and I didn't have that. I just didn't have that in the budget. And it felt unfair to offer one person money to do what other people had given me while they were on the bus to work. The Maltese guy, Thomas Faruja, he literally just sat on a bus on the way to work. And, that's how long I had was his bus ride to ask him the questions. So yeah, that didn't work. And then I actually came across a sculptor called Benno Schatz, who used to teach and latterly lead at the Glasgow School of Art. And I thought, what a brilliant contribution this man has made. And he had very unhelpfully died. So I wasn't able to speak to him, but I profiled him anyway, because Glasgow is full of his statues, public art everywhere around. And, it was once I looked, you could see them everywhere. Oh, he did that sculpture. Oh, he did that relief in the church, Oh, here's another sculpture in the park, And I think that's a really lovely thing to have him included in it. So yeah, and Cyprus was hard, mainly because, I wanted to find somebody who genuinely was from there, not just had a granny there or whatever. There were lots of people with connections, but I found